USA band. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flags. American flags. American flags. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American.
Welcome, everybody, to the Patriots Prayer Podcast on this beautiful Wednesday, April the 17th. Normally, on this podcast, we discuss the political atmosphere of our country and what we can do to improve our daily lives and kind of get through this culture. But today, we have kind of a different conversation. We're joined by an interesting guest that I've been personally following for a long time, and I'm actually really excited to have him on. His name is Ben Davidson. He is a renowned expert in the field of solar terrestrial interactions and climate forcing. So he's been a leading voice in understanding the great cycles of the sun and its impact on the planet. One of the most interesting, I guess, predictions that he has coming up is the geomagnetic pole shift, which I would love to discuss with him today on the podcast and kind of get his insight on how it's going to affect Earth and what stage we're in this cycle, what we can do to prepare, and what we can expect. So we are thrilled to have him on the podcast. Of course, we have my co-host Eddie Smith of the Patriots Prayer and Ben Davidson. We can bring them both up. Close. There we go. Look at that. How you doing, Ben?
It's another day here in Clown World.
Yeah. So I've had, let's see. I don't know how long I've been following you, but I know for a fact that the Earth disaster cycle that you speak of has been kind of a topic that has always been piquing my interest.
I've heard about it. I've heard about it since I was a kid. My grandmother was the first one that actually talked about the magnetic pole shift and that sort of thing. Yeah, so I've always heard about it. And I meant to do this when he came on.
The final frontier, space.
There, now it's done. Now it's done. But yeah, how can we possibly prepare for north going south and south going north? I mean, what's going to happen? How long do we have? Is the sky falling, essentially? Break it down.
So I think the best way to do this is, I feel like the best way to start for you guys in your audience who recognize so many of the economic, political, cultural, and even spiritual issues that are going on in the world right now. Everything from America is under attack. God is under attack. Our way of life, our economy are under attack. And it's very nice of the sun to finally peek out through the clouds and try to blind me here. It hasn't done that all day. But one thing that I'm sure your people have noticed, and I'm sure you have noticed, is that it used to be slow, calculated, covert. Not anymore. They are in your face with this. It is blatantly obvious with everything just how against the people they really are. And if it seems like they have abandoned this covert plan and are acting recklessly, it's because they know there's not going to be a reckoning. If it seems like they are censoring and attacking and spending like there's no tomorrow, it's because they know on a given timeline there really isn't one. Basically, the reason why everything has been accelerated and they have thrown caution to the wind and they're now going at light speed and they don't care how many people recognize just how messed up the stuff they're doing is because they realize that their timeline is short. Mm-hmm. I've been talking about it for a while. Earth's magnetic field, the thing that protects our planet from dangerous energy from the sun, from supernova, galactic cosmic rays, all the dangerous stuff in space. It is weakening. And this is happening as the magnetic poles on the planet have actually begun to shift.
Now, what are some of the signs that we can look at in our everyday lives and you can point to that and say that's a result of the weakening of that magnetic field?
Sure. So the vast majority of the stuff that gets blamed on climate change or global warming, it's largely due to the fact that our shield from the sun is diminishing, and the sun is taking larger and larger whacks at our planet, if I can just phrase it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of people last year started to notice that the auroras, the northern lights and the southern lights, were very, very present, and that they were. In fact, we broke every single auroral record that we had last year. Problem is, sun didn't really do very much. It's just that our shield against the sun is very weak. So the little normal activity that we would be expecting from the sun right now, nothing spectacular, was causing record-breaking auroral activity. And what those auroras actually are is the particles from the sun actually breaking through the magnetic field and hitting the top of the atmosphere. It is an electrochemical reaction that creates the northern lights. And so what we actually saw over the last year as we broke those records, and from a more complex scientific standpoint, there's dozens of papers coming out talking about unexpected solar effects on the magnetic field, unexpected solar impacts on the atmosphere. It's like, okay, well, they might be unexpected if you're not paying attention to the fact that we have our weakening field. But, you know, when something happens 15, 17, 20 times over the span of a year or two, and it's always unexpected, or astronomers are baffled, or this, it's like, well, okay, maybe you guys should stop being baffled and stop not expecting these things and ask why they keep happening. And the reason they keep happening is because we are losing our planetary protection as the magnetic poles shift. And
I think
we actually, go ahead.
Really quick, I think one of the most interesting parts about this is that there's a lot of people, and like you were saying earlier, that feel like we're living in a time that is going to be biblical, right? And it's almost like a universal sentiment that people are sharing and kind of going through this experience. And a lot of the detractors from this narrative say that, you know, oh, every generation says that the world's going to end. Every single generation going back, you know, to X amount of time always believes that they're going to be the last generation. They're going to go through the apocalypse. But this, you know, this feels a little bit different because, I mean, our culture has completely lost all of its morals. You know, if you look, there's a combination or a culmination of all of these things that has kind of really solidified this belief for me. Where, you know, you look at Revelation or End of Days in the Bible and how they describe how people are going to act and how they're going to be reckless, and, you know, men being lovers of men and certain things like that. That where you kind of look out into the culture and you're like, okay, there's definitely something bigger going on here, and you can sort of feel it. And I know that there's, like, when we lose our protection, that it can have an effect on you psychologically, because we have electricity running through our brains. So do you want to touch a little bit on that?
Sure, absolutely. And, you know, this is one of the things that has solidified my faith over the last couple of years more than anything else my entire life. You know, I can explain Revelation 16:8, the sun given the power to scorch men with fire. I can explain the sun going dark, and that is going to happen for 3 days. I can explain a third of the stars in the sky not being visible anymore. I can explain the earth wobbling to and fro like a drunkard from a scientific perspective.
The one just after that, it's the one just after that that intrigues me, and I talk about it on here all the time. It's 16:12, where he said all this will happen when the river Euphrates dries up, and it just dried up.
Right. But, you know, he made a good point about the psychology of people. Now, here's the interesting thing. I mentioned that we're getting more auroras because more of the energy is breaking through into the atmosphere. Most of it is being deposited into the upper atmosphere for now, but the highest energy particles among them are coming down to the ground level. Now, this does two things to the human brain, and this has been studied a lot. Some on humans, but a lot on like mice and rats and other mammals and other things like that. But there have been, a few dozen human studies. They noticed two main things happening when we're bombarded with this kind of energy. First, the hippocampus doesn't work as well. They call it cognitive diminution, which is a fun way of saying we get dumber. The second thing that happens is deep inside of our brain, something called the locus coeruleus gets overly excited by this energy. And this is this is the part of the brain that helps us react to anxiety, panic, terror, fear in general. And so, and when it gets overexcited, it also causes emotional instability. And so if it seems like the world is getting dumber, if it seems like we are becoming more emotionally unstable, if it seems like people are reacting out of fear and anxiety and terror, you're right. And that's exactly scientifically what would we be expecting to happen during this time.
Can we guard against it? Is it just nothing we can do about it? Can we guard against it?
Yeah, you absolutely can guard against it. I'll take a moment for this because this is one of my favorite things to tell people. Everybody's heard of the placebo effect, right? It's just a placebo effect. It's just some mundane thing. No, it's magic. You think something that's not factually real, and yet the biology, the chemistry, and the physics inside of the system that your brain controls breaks the laws of physics and manifests a different reality that shouldn't be, because the thing you're thinking isn't actual fact. It's just your thoughts that make it happen. That's number one. Two, there's some bad information on the internet, but in general, it's like many legends and myths. It's rooted in truth. Our bodies have an energy field around them. And this energy field can protect us, much like the magnetic field is supposed to protect the Earth. It's weakening right now.
Referred to as an aura, maybe?
So that's part of it. There's an aura layer. There is a more electrified field layer, and then there's an actual magnetic field. You strengthen these with your diet, with exercise, with a bevy of mental things you can do. One, you can placebo yourself. You can know that you have the power and be stronger. This is just energy. We are energy. We interact with energy every day. The other thing is healing traumas. It's nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to go digging up stuff that is buried deep down, but it manifests in our daily lives. And also things like meditation and prayer. All of these things that are things you can do to strengthen your body's energy field, which is our last line of defense against some of these things.
Meditation is something that I push wholeheartedly. I believe in it completely. It changed my perspective. People don't realize, I guess, as much as you can exercise the body and how well that works for the body, you can do the same thing with your mind. So if you're someone who your thoughts wander, or whatever it may be, you can actually learn to bring your mind into a submissive state that you control instead of the other way around.
Absolutely.
I really do like how you kind of made a point to heal traumas as well, because I think people underestimate the effects that can have on your daily life and how you can actually perceive the world when you have that constant nagging, even if you think it's barely there, that there's a constant nagging that is weighing you down and pulling you down and not letting you become who you can become.
Exactly.
or put out that energy. One of the reasons I actually grew up my hair was because Native Americans believe that hair is an extension of your nervous system, and that you can be more in tune with not only other people but the earth better because of something like an aura I know that there's I don't know how to say it scientifically, but people do they call it vibes, right? They put off vibes, and so that's actually one of the reasons why I really wanted to grow out my hair, is so I could be more in tune with the people around me, whether it be love or fear or whatever it may be. But I wanted to get more in tune with the people around me, with the world, and be able to, I guess, safeguard against any threat, or at least hopefully have a heads up of some kind. So
Also,
Yeah.
it's one of the things.
Maybe I will. Maybe I won't.
One of the things about trauma, though, let's say you're very young when trauma occurs, 15, 14, whatever it is. Psychiatrists, psychologists truly believe that you remain that age, that whatever that when that trauma happened, until you heal it, you don't grow. Like there's a part of your growth that's stunted as a person. So when people have those breakthroughs and are able to forgive and they're able to move on, and it helps them grow. And they're literally, there are 40-year-old men that are stuck at 18, 16 because of the things they incurred.
Let's say you've got some kind of destructive tendency. Like, let's say you've got a horrible drug addiction. You know, there are some people who are able to just willpower themselves to say no to it. But a much larger group in terms of percentage of successful individuals are the ones who go back and say, all right, why did I start doing this? What am I hiding from? What problem is this? And so those people, I mean, like I said, there are people who manage to be successful just, willpower and just trying to stop it. But there's a much higher percentage of success with people who actually dig down. It's like, all right, what are my destructive tendencies? What insecurities do I have that are driving these? And what traumas do I have that are deep rooted, that are triggering these insecurities in me? And how do I get rid of those? Those people tend to do the best. But
okay, I think I want to get to the main question that I wanted to get to. Okay,
when are we gonna die?
Yeah, well, kind of. So with the geomagnetic pole shift, when do you think that something like this could happen? Why is it going to happen? And just I guess when and why would be my question.
And how is Biden to blame? No, I'm teasing. Go ahead.
Of course, Joe Biden is to blame. Joe Biden is to blame for everything. Everybody knows that. Math says it should happen at some point before 2050. Now, while that means we could have until 2049, it could happen in the next couple of years. What we don't know is when specific acceleration points are going to take place. So, for example, the magnetic field really started to change in the late 1850s. And about 150 years later, by the year 2000, we had lost 10% of the magnetic field. That was 24 years ago. We've already lost more than 10% more now. So it took us 150 years to lose 10%. We've already lost probably another 15 to 20% just in the last 2 decades. And we know that
whales to go off course and beach themselves because the magnetic the polarity is how they
it's causing the issues with the whales. If anybody heard about that herd of elephants in China that just sort of broke loose and started walking to higher ground 2 years ago, there was a major magnetic anomaly that happened in China at that time. It's affecting insects, it's affecting birds, it's affecting the population like crazy, but pretty much everything migratory has the opportunity to be affected by this. And with the exception of a few small examples of whales that are being taken out by some of the wave and wind devices off the east coast of the United States, the majority of the whale beachings, the problems with turtles finding their way, even there's several stories of sharks, salmon. These things are due to the fact that they don't know where they're going anymore. Their compass is all messed up. And it's not just for a seasonal migration. They'll use the magnetic fields for foraging, for finding mating grounds, and other things like that. And so we don't really know exactly when these major acceleration points are coming, but based on the latest data that we have, if we don't get another strong acceleration and we just sort of keep going as we are, it'll take till about 2049 for this to happen. Now we're getting these major accelerations now about every 7 or 8 years. And so we would be expecting another one to be coming very soon. In fact, we just had the last major acceleration in March of last year, just over a year ago, which happens to also explain why there were all those record auroras and unexpected solar effects on the atmosphere over the last year. And there's this guy, he's actually out of Russia. His name's Sergey. He's a really cool guy. He's one of their top geophysicists, and he wouldn't shut up about this. So they shipped him off to far eastern Russia, like Siberia, Kamchatka area. But he kept doing his research, and even though he wasn't in Moscow anymore, and he put out this paper just a couple weeks ago saying, guys, I have tracked the latest major magnetic anomaly. It was in March of 2023, and we are accelerating even faster right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get another major acceleration towards the end of this decade, and it happens at some time in the 2030s or even early 2040s. Now, of course, before that, we're going to have a lot to worry about from the idiots running this planet. And so we sort of have a war on multiple fronts. But, did you expect this to be easy? It's not going to be that easy. But, the interesting thing is this happens at a minor level every 6,000 years, and then a big one every 12,000 years. Unfortunately, we're at the 12,000-year cycle, and it's going to be a big one. But this happens to some degree every 6,000 years, and we are still here. And so humans survive this every time. And what we know is that there are certain things about the major surviving cultures. And I don't mean like, okay, somebody managed to go off and survive in the forest, or somebody managed to build a raft and, float away to some other place. I'm talking about the cultures that actually persisted from before these events until after these events. None of them were by the ocean. The tsunamis are going to be unreal, and they're going to hit pretty much every coastline. Most of them were not only far away from the ocean, but they were at relatively high elevation. We're talking the kinds of tsunamis that create surge deposits. I
don't think we've explained to everybody exactly what this polar shift does. So when the North and South Pole, when the magnetic, I would like you to explain this, but if you had to give like a 1 minute elevator pitch on what exactly happens during this 12,000 year cycle where the poles actually flip, like when that happens, what does this cause?
I mean, it causes a global earthquake. It causes volcanoes to go off everywhere. It causes a shift in the Earth's crust. It causes massive tsunamis. It causes unbelievable extreme weather. It causes about a 60 to 200% increase in radiation from space reaching the surface, us. And all of those things combined are the reason why every significant scientific study on this suggests that major extinctions are tied to these events. In fact, when we're talking about the big ones that happen every 12,000 years, something like 80% of all the megafaunal extinctions in the last 50 to 60,000 years happened coincident with these events, and that includes the Neanderthals. So this is a very serious thing, and it's a combination of, the earth goes crazy itself in terms of the weather, in terms of the earthquakes, in terms of land rising and falling. I mean, there's going to be parts of the earth that fall into the sea, and there's going to be other parts where the seabed rises up out of the ground. There's volcanoes.
That's where Atlantis went, guys.
Yeah, that's probably where a large bit of it.
We can trace civilization back through writings and archaeology to about 12,000 years ago. Like you said, that's when the Sumerian Sanskrits were all thought or believed to be about 12,000 years ago. Also, lately, I guess there's some new science that states that they know that like the Sphinx and these things that we reveal now in Egypt, the pyramids of Giza and all that they say are much older than the Egyptian culture, and now much older. They predate Egypt, and from a civilization that they don't even know the name of it, the civilization. and
Right.
is very believable because of all the water erosion on the Sphinx. It didn't just happen over time; it happened because of water. We can see the evidence of that on both the pyramids and the Sphinx itself.
Well, and one thing the Egyptians were known for is documenting everything, but they didn't document how they built the pyramids or why, which is one of those things where you're like, So
Well,
did you guys actually build that or no?
I can take a stab at why they're there. I think they're batteries. That's what all the alkalinity inside the pyramids is there for. If the Nile were to flow closer to them and through them, they'd act like giant power generators.
Yeah,
It's very possible. Very possible.
So, what is it? Göbekli Tepe, I think, in Turkey.
Yeah.
Now, wasn't that intentionally buried? And I feel like
they'd like us to think so. I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I think that was covered up by the Earth. I think the Earth.
Okay.
I think the Earth deposited a phenomenal amount of sand there during one of those great tsunamis I was talking about. So if you think about it, there's no purpose in burying something like that. When you look at the expanse and how much sand is there, you have to question whether or not that's even possible for people to do. Meanwhile, with the event that we have evidence of, and which is going to happen again, the Earth can just sort of do it casually in a matter of hours. And so I think that that's probably a much better explanation for Göbekli Tepe.
That makes sense. It kind of spoils it for me a little bit because I mean, I imagined that maybe they saw an event like this coming and they were like, okay, this is our only way to preserve this is to put it underground. You know, like all the billionaires right now are building bunkers and they're all getting ready for something, right? And so what do billionaires do when they're preparing for a disaster? They go underground. So
Bible says that they'll hide in the rocks and they won't matter.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Talks about it. But you know, if you take a look at the Grand Canyon, and you know, they try to tell us that the Colorado River eroded that over God knows how long, but the reality of it is that it doesn't. And one of the things that I like I told you, I'm a documentary nerd. So there's a story about how they can tell how old a specific rock is, and it goes with what a paleontologist does. So the guy, you know, picks up a rock and goes over to who's the guys that study rocks? Give me the geologist. So he goes over to the geologist and rock. How old is this rock? And he's 2 million years old. And then he says, well, how do you know? He says, well, it has this bone in it. Pulls out a dinosaur bone. His bone was in that rock, so we know it was at least 2 million years old. And then the guy goes to the guy who does mess with the bones. The paleontologist says, okay, you know, how old's his bone? Is 2 million years? How do you know? Because it was found in that rock. Like they don't know. Like there are whole portions. There are whole portions of the Grand Canyon that are not there. They were swept off. The rock is eroded like you hit it with a power washer, like at extreme speed. And
a power washer or a massive electrical discharge. Here's something you could think about. The first thing I think about when I think about the Grand Canyon is layer on top of layer on top of layer on top of layer. Well, guess what? There are some layers in there that erode, like where this one on top erodes 10,000 times faster than this one. So how are they a straight line? If this one erodes 10,000 times faster than this one, there should just be a flat tabletop, and that one should have been eroded back like crazy. But no, that's not what you see. It's all straight up and down like that. There's no way water did that over tens, hundreds of thousands, millions of years.
Not at all. Not at all.
No sense. Makes no sense.
And then there are certain large animals that have been found, their bodies going through the crust of several different layers, one body. So,
plus the government has a big portion of the Grand Canyon blocked off as well. As far as I know, if you travel to certain parts of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. Did you guys ever hear the story about the Egyptian hieroglyphs and the Egyptian statues that are in the Grand Canyon? I think that's the part that got blocked off. The government's been doing everything they can to cover this up for quite some time. And there's only two reasons we really actually know that the Earth actually does a tilt, it does a wobble, which actually is what sloshes the oceans around. One of them is it requires a bit of thinking when it comes to the mammoths, but the other one is a guy named Major Maynard E. White. He led Project Nanook up to the Arctic back in the 1940s. Now, they classified all of his stuff, but he knew they were going to keep it classified. So he kept copies of everything, not just from the mission, but from the meetings at the Pentagon, the conclusion from the OSS scientists. And by the way, back then, the OSS was the Office of Strategic Services. That's the group that morphed into the CIA. He kept the reports from the Rand Corporation, and he gave them to his son, Ken White, to publish, which he did several decades later in a book called World in Peril. And it was the government's and Rand Corporation's conclusion that, okay, the only way to have this happen is the world's got to turn over during these magnetic pole shifts. Because basically what they did was they went up there to try to figure out, okay, how do we do military warfare up here in the Arctic? They were worried about Russia coming over the top, right? Mm-hmm. And so they realized that the first thing they realized was, okay, we need to find out how to navigate, because most of the time, the compass with the magnetic pole, it doesn't matter. But when you're up there right next to the magnetic pole, you've got to find a new way to navigate, because, you take off and the magnetic pole's there. An hour later, the magnetic pole's behind you. You got to find a new way to navigate. So first thing they had to do is they were trying to dig down and try to find evidence of the magnetic pole and how it was moving over time. But what they did when they dug down is they found, obviously, the first thing they found was polar fossils. But underneath that, they found tropical fossils. And underneath that, a layer of polar fossils. And underneath that, a layer of tropical fossils. And they did the math and they put it together with the evidence. They're like, man, the Earth turns over. And this,
so is it like a 45-degree tilt where it like
23,
it doesn't go 90,
a full 90 degrees. And
Wow.
and here's the other thing to think about. You couple that with the story of the mammoths that were frozen. Everybody's heard about the flash frozen mammoths where the food is undigested in their mouths and their stomachs. And everyone's like, how do you freeze a mammoth so fast? How do you work that? I'm like, you guys are missing the elephant in the room, or the mammoth in the room. The mammoth in the room is, what were they eating? You go up to that place now, there's nothing for them to eat. Those things had to eat 1,000, 2,000 pounds a day. And they were frozen during the glacial cycle. No way they were eating anything at that latitude. The only explanation is that they were foraging at a much lower latitude, and then the Earth turned over, and all of a sudden, they picked their head up from eating grass, and they're like, where'd the sun go? Why are we in the North Pole? What happened? There's no explanation. You can literally, and we are 12,000 years into an interglacial warm period right now. And if there's not enough food for them to eat there now, when they got frozen in the glacial cycle, they weren't up there eating plants at that. No, they were at lower latitude, and then they got thrust there when the Earth turned over. And
so how do you feel about Richard Byrd and his account of
so this is really interesting. This is really interesting. Admiral Byrd, he may have done some interesting stuff in Antarctica, but during the time when his books claim he went inside the Earth in Antarctica, he was with Major White at the North Pole. Document the exact same time he claimed. Now, granted, he could have changed facts. The government could have made him change some facts.
For the people listening, what we're referring to right now is called the Hollow Earth theory.
Correct.
And Byrd said there were things up there flying around that could fly from pole to pole in what I think he said seconds.
Yeah, and so,
and he said it on TV.
I don't want to sit here and debunk his story. I just can tell you that at the very least, they switched the timelines, because the timeline he gave in his books and in his talks, he was without doubt up with Major White in Project Nanook. He was there too.
Interesting.
One of the things that he said that was really interesting is that there is a body of land beyond the ice wall about the size of the United States of America that's not frozen at all, and the weather makes it habitable. And he said that on in Australia on a TV show. Like, it was It's like, yeah,
Well,
there's
so-
a whole bunch of wind down there.
So, this part is pure speculation from me. I think that the government made him tell some tall tales, because it wouldn't be the first time they did that to somebody. They did that with a guy named Charles Hapgood, who everybody knows as the guy who invented Earth's crust displacement theory. That Charles Hapgood, the one who had the foreword of his book written by Einstein. Here's the problem with that. His theory was easily debunked, and it crushed the theory of catastrophism for many years. His idea was that it takes a couple thousand years and that the Earth tilts about 7 degrees. That's easily debunkable. It's one day, 90-degree turn. Now, here's the thing. Charles Hapgood, when he wrote those books, he was just some run-of-the-mill random college professor, right? He worked for the CIA. And before it was the CIA, he worked for the OSS. And in fact, he was in the Pentagon meetings when Major White brought the Project Nanook stuff there. He was one of the scientists that came up with one day 90-degree tilt. He was there when the Rand Corporation came in and confirmed everything mathematically. So what happened? What happened between then and about 10 years later? The government made him crush the theory. They're like, you're going to go out and you're going to make it so anybody who talks about the Earth's crust being displaced looks like an idiot. And you're going to do that by putting out an official theory. We're going to have Einstein back you up. He's already dead. We could just say he said whatever, because he was dead at that point. And it will be so easily debunkable and so laughable that we will crush this line of questioning. We will crush this field of science forever. And it almost worked. It almost worked.
Till we got the internet.
Yeah. Till we got the internet. And the Adam and Eve story was declassified by Freedom of Information Act. And that led us through a guy named Chan Thomas to a whole bunch of other ancient researchers.
What was the Adam and Eve story? I didn't hear
So
it.
the Adam and Eve story is a book by Chan Thomas that should have shaken the entire world, but it was basically silenced. There's some arguments about whether or not parts of it were actually classified. Essentially, it didn't get the kind of notoriety that it should have, or the kind of fame that it should have. The book is called The Adam and Eve Story, and really the best one, he made 3 different versions. His first one was in 1966. His last one wasn't until 1991 or 1992. And that's the one.
What was it referencing? What was it? What was the story in it? What was
this 12,000 year disaster cycle? There is a major magnetic pole shift. The Earth changes its orientation. Massive tsunamis hit every continent. Volcanoes, earthquakes, severe weather.
So there isn't any way to protect ourselves from this. I mean, if that's really the way it is, there's no point. I mean, you're not running and hiding.
No. So it's easy to say that upon that, but here's the other thing. Every time humans make it, and every time it's the humans that are away from the oceans, that are at high elevation and have a way to hide underground. That's what Cappadocia in Turkey was used for. That's what cliff dwellings about a couple miles away from me were used for. All you have to do is be away from the ocean, high elevation, and have a way to hide underground, because the hail, the wind, the storms, the temperature changes are going to be absolutely devastating in the aftermath, to the point where building a house, building a castle, not going to do you any good. You need to just be under the ground. You don't have to be that far under the ground either. The ground is an incredible insulator. And I don't know how
do you mean for weeks or months, like or years afterwards?
You don't need to be for any extended period of time. You just need to be able to retreat there when things are getting rough. When all of a sudden, in the middle of the day, the temperature drops 15 degrees and the sky turns black, and 2-foot size hailstones start falling. Or when all of a sudden you go from a calm breeze to 100, 200 mile an hour winds. You need somewhere to get. Trees become bullets at that point. Little rocks on the ground become bullets at that point. Birds become bullets at that point. And so
So it's not that the wind is blowing, it's what the wind is blowing.
it's largely blowing.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of both. Yeah. But humans survive this every single time. And at no point is it bad enough that it kills the whole world. There are some stories from researchers that talk about waves 2 miles high, like in the movie 2012. There'd be nothing left. They're talking about 1,000-mile-an-hour winds. Oh, yeah? Then why are there animals and people surviving in the aftermath? If there's 1,000-mile-an-hour winds all over the planet, everything's dead. And I mean, everything's dead. So it's bad, but it's like you can make it. It's very much the ultimate environmental gauntlet, but it can be survived. It absolutely can be.
Does the Earth doesn't the Earth like continue accelerating as well? Like doesn't it speed up before this happens, or am I remembering something wrong?
It really should, and because Earth acts a little bit like an electric motor or a homopolar motor, and just a simple internet search for something like record shortest day can bring up all the articles from the last 4 years. Earth is breaking its actual speed records. Now it's only by, a millisecond here, a millisecond there, but the Earth has been averaging a spin that's slightly less than 24 hours. It used to be they would have to add a leap second actually to the clock every couple of years. Now they're thinking about taking one away because the Earth is starting to speed up. And the reason why it's speeding up is because we are an electrodynamic planet. We're taking in more energy as the magnetic field is weakening. More energy in, faster spin, kind of like an electric or homopolar motor. And so that's also in the Bible, right? If the days were not shortened, which is what happens when we spin faster than 24 hours, the days are becoming a little shorter. If the days weren't shortened, isn't that in the Bible? And so
that's a different take on that, because you always assume that what he means is like whatever wrath he's pouring out, that he wouldn't do it for as long. But what you're stating is that we're not talking about whether the day shortened, but the actual day becomes shorter. No flesh will survive.
Right.
Cool take. Very cool take.
You asked a question at the beginning. Why is this happening? Why does this happen every 6,000 and to a greater extent every 12,000 years? It actually is coming from the galaxy. It's coming from the center of the galaxy in a wave, a radial wave that spirals outward. It's called the galactic current sheet. There was a time when people didn't know it existed, but now we not only know that it exists here in the Milky Way, we've spotted it in several other galaxies. And we've studied the one here in this galaxy so well that we know its amplitude and we know how thick they are. And basically what it is this is the magnetic reversal point of the entire galaxy. And it contains a lot of dust and it contains a lot of charged particles as well. Here's why this is important. It's important because this is a way to have this electromagnetic system affect our solar system regularly on a repeatable cycle the same way every time. What else is it going to do? Well, the more they're studying the sun, the more they realize that its brightness, its luminosity, and its pouring out of solar wind particles all the time has to do almost exclusively with electrical processes on the surface of the star that's integrated in its entire electromagnetic system. Well, what happens during a galactic magnetic reversal? During a galactic magnetic reversal, which we are about to go through right now, we hit the point where north becomes south, where positive becomes negative. And right in the middle, there's a 0 point, a null point, where there is no magnetism at all. 0. When that happens, the source for the sun's electrical activity on the surface gets damped out and it starts to darken. It starts to lose its brightness at that same time. its solar wind outflow sort of slows down and stops, and it allows all the extra dust that I mentioned that's coming with the current sheet to begin accumulating. So the sun starts to dim and it turns red. Then the dust accumulates and it turns black. And then very rapidly, about, I don't know, 3 days later, we pass through the galactic reversal. We're now in another galactic electric field. The sun clicks back on and it blasts that out in the great solar flash.
Well, during this time, your electronics, whatever electronics you have, whatever car, all that's done. That's done.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because of the EMP or whatever.
We can say goodbye to electricity for the new age of Earth. We're going to have to go back to Stone Age or Bronze Age, something like that, and work it back. But, you know, here's the thing. We see evidence of this, not just here on Earth with our magnetism changing. We see it on the sun. The sun's magnetism is changing. We see evidence of magnetic changes on all the other planets. And not only that, the dust is increasing in our solar system. They've spotted it at the sun, at the top of the sun's atmosphere, where it's already starting to build up. Here at Earth, we have 60% more dust in the upper atmosphere than we did 100 years ago. And you want to blame extra winds from climate change and global warming? Guess what? That accounts for maybe 2%. We have extra dust they are noticing throughout the interplanetary space, the space between the planets. And just a couple of weeks ago, New Horizons discovered there's even more dust than they expected past Pluto. We are taking these magnetic changes throughout the system.
Let me ask you.
Go ahead.
What do you think they are protecting in Antarctica then? Why is it that we can't go down there? We can't see these things, and for what reason?
They're doing two things. They're doing two things. One, they are rapidly they're trying as fast as they can to find evidence and secrets from past civilizations, things like that, because there's a lot of it there. Because 12,000 years ago, it was at the equator. They also know that it's going to be at the equator again when the Earth goes like this. It's the same reason why all the seed vaults are at high latitude. Like, do you ever wonder why all the seed vaults are like frozen in ice up there? It's because they're not going to be frozen. The world's going to go like this, and all those seed vaults are going to be at the equator as they're trying to restart civilization.
Where does the United States
So the United States is basically going to be at the same latitudes, but in the southern hemisphere. And when I say the same latitudes, I mean the middle of the country, places like where I am, Colorado, Pennsylvania, they will be at the same latitudes in the southern hemisphere. But because we're just, picture us on a globe just going like this, places like New Mexico and Montana, swap. Canada and Mexico, swap. Florida and Maine, swap their climates. And so
okay. So it spins the other way with us. We're here and it goes like this. We're in the center of it.
Basically, if you take a globe, have Greenland, like be looking at Greenland, and then just tilt Greenland until it's at the equator. When you do that, Antarctica will be at the equator on the other side. The new North Pole will be the Bay of Bengal, just to the east of India, and the new South Pole will be somewhere near Brazil, Ecuador, somewhere like that.
So where is the safest places in the United States? For instance, I'm in Nevada.
Where I am. It's why I moved here. Where I am.
Everybody moved to Colorado, quick.
So
I can't do it.
Hey, I had a question about the space dust that you had brought up. So when that space dust gathers around the sun, because one of the theories that intrigued me early on that I kind of let go was Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. They had that theory that meteors came down and that's what flooded the Earth, right? Well, so did you just kind of like integrate their theory into this by explaining that? Like, does that dust, when it explodes off the sun, does it come down as meteors, or
so
is that a possibility?
A lot of that will be coming down as impactors. And the reason I was on Randall Carlson's side for the longest time, but I very much believe in a challenge to the catastrophist community that was made by a guy named Hibben about 100 years ago. He said, there are tons of great theories for explaining this and explaining this and explaining this. The problem is we all know what happens at the same time. And so we can't have all these different things happening at the same time. We need something that can explain all of the evidence. And the problem is, in all of these sediments, there are nova level isotopes. And I mean, we're talking about isotopes you can't make in a volcano. You can't make in a lightning strike. You can't make with an impactor. It takes a nova level event from a star. And it just so happens that, you know, one of the things that happens is Earth's magnetic field begins shifting, you know, several years before and culminates in this big event. Okay, how is a meteor or a comet going to impact Earth's magnetic field in the first place? But also, how would it affect Earth's magnetic field for years leading up to its coming? It can't. It can't explain all the evidence. However, when the galactic magnetic reversal happens, you can explain the buildup. When the sun gets blanked out electromagnetically and then blasts off that outer shell of dust, which cools and congeals into meteors over time, then you can get the impactors as well. The other problem with a different meteor or comet impact theory is a big impactor can only hit once, and there's impactors with every single one of these cycles. So what is it? A comet that's so big it's just got tons of stuff coming off of it? Well, guess what? We can see tiny little comets, you know, 20,000 years away. We would see something like that. Okay, well, what if it's a meteor field? Oh, we'd see that with radio astronomy very easily. In fact, they would have spotted that a long time ago. And all of that stuff is now public data. Anybody can just go and look at any of this data. And so rather than trying to say, okay, well, we just got unlucky every 12,000 years and we got hit by a comet at the same time Earth randomly decided to have a pole shift at the same time that, oh, a bunch of random dust with nova isotopes fell to Earth. No. All you need is this galactic magnetic reversal, which also triggers a solar micronova. And you literally can explain all the evidence at the same time.
Got a question for you from the guys watching. So it says, is it possible that the seacoast in Florida could rise before the slosh back and flood? They have your book, but still wonder about this.
If you are living in Florida and that's why you're asking, for your sake, I hope so. Because Florida otherwise is completely screwed. It's a shame because from a political standpoint, you got to love everything that's going on in Florida, right? But yeah. No, it is the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic that attacks the United States this cycle. And boy, that's a bad day to be in Florida. And unfortunately, there's no real way to know which parts of the land are going to rise and which are going to fall. It's a lot of mantle heaving and a lot of guesswork. About the best I can do is guess that East African rift is going to split open and part of it's going to go up and part of it's going to go down. But other than that, it is absolute guessing what's going to go up and what's going to go down.
Wow. So the data here that we're talking about, this is empirical. The research has been done. We're not discussing theories at this point. You're saying this is happening. This is coming. Get ready. Expect it. That's what it is. That's absolutely what you're saying.
And it's also the reason why they have abandoned their covert plan for control and power takeover on the planet wide. They don't care anymore that everybody's waking up, that everyone can see what they're doing. They're like, no, we're out of time. They're not going to get their together in time to stop us anyway. This is why. It also happens to be that this is related to everything from the stuff we talked about at the start of the show. It's related to COVID. It's related to their climate propaganda. It's related to the trans agenda. What?
Make the COVID tie.
The COVID tie? They are doing everything possible to try to take our freedoms, get control, and give themselves as much power and resources as humanly possible while also distracting us. They need us distracted. Because if we knew what was actually going on, if the world knew, there'd be anarchy. Nobody's going to work the next day. You call 911, no one's picking up the phone. Nobody's going to help you at the bank. Nobody's driving the food truck across the country the next day.
So that would make complete sense as to why a lot of these things they call or term family centers across the United States that they've built along the railways are along the railways, because I assume they're thinking that is going to be their only way to travel once this is all said and done.
That may be their idea. They're not going to work so well.
FEMA camps, that's what I'm talking about. There's multiple.
Yeah, I mean,
Earth is going to screw that up.
Yeah, the Earth is going to screw that up. That's never going to work. They're never going to be riding rails anywhere. But, they've got a lot of dumb plans. And a lot of these people don't have the full story. Like, Mark Zuckerberg has enough power to be let in on some of the secret. They don't like Mark Zuckerberg. They're like, yeah, well, why don't you go build in Hawaii? Yeah, go ahead. That'll be just fine. That's the dumbest place you could ever build a bunker, Hawaii. Really? Somebody didn't tell him the story. Somebody didn't tell him the whole story.
So that's just going to get swallowed by the ocean, right?
He even worked for the Biden administration for a while and wore a wig. They called him Jen Psaki. So he went back to being his regular stuff.
I just checked the clock. We got time for one more great question before I have to put my children to sleep here.
I feel that.
So we talked a bit about Antarctica. We talked about the pole shift. We talked about the timeline for these things happening and why they're happening. You're saying the safest place to be is in Colorado, Montana.
So, I would say the eastern range of the Rockies, which technically goes from northern Mexico up to Idaho. There are parts Idaho near the northern side that are pretty tough for me to say are as good, but opposite of Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos has an amazing bug out plan. He is in the eastern range in the Sierra Diablos in New Mexico, right on the edge of Texas, actually. And he is hollowing out a mountain right next to the Blue Origin launch facility so that he can go up or he can go down. And that's actually a theme with a lot of these billionaires who want to survive. Elon Musk has SpaceX. He's also got the Boring Company, and he's creating huge tunnels everywhere.
Yeah, we worked with him to build it here in Vegas. We actually worked with him at our convention center to his Boring Company. Pretty neat stuff, too.
Yeah, I would say that the best places to be in the world are either on the eastern range of the Rocky Mountains or in some of the ranges in Mongolia.
And what does a survival kit look like? What
survival kit?
Yeah. What should people keep and have on hand in case of that emergency? Seeds, obviously, to what degree?
It's the emergency prepping stuff that most people have: food, water, medical supplies, clothes, guns, and bullets. But it's also got to have the second component, which is after this, the lights don't go back on. No one's coming to help. You're starting civilization over again. So that's what books are you going to need so you know how to do what you need to do? What other supplies do you need to build a shelter? Seeds, pre-industrial tools, things like that, and some planning as well. And nobody can learn everything that's going to be needed before it happens, but having the right books can probably make all the difference in the world.
And with that,
including the Bible, because it sure seems like a lot of the warnings that they put in the Bible are coming to fruition now. Even the stuff we didn't understand, like the drying up of the Euphrates River, how people are going to act. And it's all kind of making sense when you put out this theory. And Ben, thank you for coming on. Man, it has been a pleasure talking to you. You're a great guy. Everybody, if you can, where can they follow you? Yeah, where can they follow you, Ben?
On X, Twitter, @SunWeatherman, or at the YouTube channel Suspicious Observers.
Are you on Rumble as well?
I am, but nobody watches me there, really. So
It's a hard nut to crack. I say that all the time. So, guys, anyone watching right now, we are really building up our Rumble channel. Rumble is very good to content creators, so we really need the people that watch the show to go to rumble.com/the Patriots Prayer and follow us there. It would be a huge help.
Right on. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
That was enlightening. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, it felt like 10 minutes right now. I forgot to go to our sponsors and everything. So I'm telling you, you did a hell of a job, dude. I just want to call you up when it's over and just bug the hell out of you.
Right on. I do talk a lot. I apologize.
No, man, it was amazing. I'm sure a few glasses of whiskey on a weekend in a backyard talk, we'd be off on some rabbit holes for sure.
We could.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I appreciate you coming on. You want to say anything before we get out of here, Maurice?
Nope, just thank you, man. Get your kids to bed. God bless you. Thanks for coming on, Ben.
Yep.
God bless you guys. God bless America.
Silent majority. You need to stop being silent and stand your ground and evidently move to Colorado. We'll see you next time on the Patriots Prayer.
Come hang out. Come hang out.
My people of this country and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is America.